My first piece of advice, though, and if you take nothing else with you tonight, please remember this. I was a judge at the trade show 2 weeks ago. I saw the ingenuity, the brilliance, the creativity, diligence, follow-through, and wisdom. So my advice is do not get into the burger and frozen dessert business. Not because it hasn't been lucrative, but after reviewing your business plans, I really don't want to compete with any of you. Speaking of your business plans, it was very interesting talking to you at the trade show and listening to your ideas. If there was one common thread other than excellence that I would comment on, it was that many of you seemed to have your pricing too low, and it was lower than what it seemed to me the market would bear. Be proud of your products or your service and price it with pride. As ironic as this sounds, there are many products that people gravitate towards because the price implies quality. Apple kind of comes to mind for me. Bose is another. I suppose a little background would be a good springboard here. It's an old adage, but I've always surrounded myself with good people. Make that great people who had similar work ethic. Not just as an employer, which is usually what people mean when they say this, but before that as an employee. I was surrounded, even before that, by great people because I was surrounded with my dad and my mom and brothers and sisters, all good people. I did have a hand in selecting my wife, Sally, though. Thankfully, she's a Freddy's fan, or we call Fred head, or our marriage may not be so blissful. It's blissful, right? Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in an environment that promoted work ethic. My family is spiritual, patriotic. We believe that the Founding Fathers got it right with the motto, "In God We Trust." I was in grade school during the Cold War days. The ink was still drying on the history books about the Holocaust. We grew up with little understanding as to why a people would let a few leaders, a few so-called leaders, restrict their liberties, and we had a great appreciation for the freedom we enjoyed in America, in Wichita, actually, to do whatever we wanted to do because of our unalienable right of the pursuit of happiness. We were reminded by our newly elected young, and in those days standards, liberal, president to ask not what our country could do for us, but what we could do for our country. Dating back to the early days of this country, those who governed were revered and seemed to understand that government's primary role was to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and secure the blessings of liberty, all as the Constitution guarantees. Businesses had way fewer government-promulgated obstacles to overcome, and success was never vilified. Serving was a privilege, and re-elections were less of a priority than doing what was right. We were taught that we could become anything we wanted to become, and that our limits were our dreams and our imaginations. Walt Disney was on TV every Sunday night with his show, The Wonderful World of Disney, and his inspirational message, if you can dream it, you can do it. Even though our culture and the messages on TV have changed, I believe that every American needs to understand that that American dream is still alive and well, and you should work towards and follow yours. Thank you. Anyway, that was the setting and time frame for the story of my first business plan. So at that time, my dad was working his way up in his first job after going to college on the GI Bill at what was then Wichita University. Following World War II, he was an accountant for a wholesale liquor and wine distributor here in Wichita. Beginning at a young age, we had the privilege to work summers and Christmases in the warehouse. It involved a lot of hard physical labor, lifting the boxes and being out in the heat all day, but my brothers and I later learned that it was Dad's intention that we work in that hot warehouse all day to ensure that we would go to college, and it worked. When I was about 16, my dad was talking around the dinner table one night about whiskey barrels. Remember, he was in the wholesale liquor business. He said that they were only used once to age whiskey, and then they were disposed of. And for reasons I can't identify, but which this group of entrepreneurs can probably relate to, I began wondering if opportunity was knocking. At my request, he checked and found out that it would cost about $7 a barrel to have them shipped to Wichita. There was a catch, though. I had to take 100 of them, but I wanted those barrels. So instead of Dad just loaning me the money, which I thought would be very easy, I got my first lesson in financing a business. He arranged an appointment at Boulevard National Bank. He told me I would need a business plan to show the banker. As is so common with entrepreneurs and what they think are great ideas, I wondered, what if this guy steals my idea with these whiskey barrels? But I became convinced he wouldn't want to take shipment of 100 used whiskey barrels at his house, and my idea would be safe. By the way, I'm pretty sure my mom didn't want 100 used whiskey barrels in her backyard either, but she never said a word. So I went in and showed this loan officer how I intended to reinforce the barrel rungs and then cut the barrels in half. I would advertise the halves in the paper and sell them as planters for $35 each. The banker agreed, I'm sure because Dad co-signed and not so much because of my great business plan. And one day I found myself unloading and rolling 100 barrels through a gate and into our backyard. After selling the first 25 halves, I was able to pay off the loan and in the end netted about $3,500. I distinctly remember two things about that. One, how much I enjoyed working for myself, setting my own hours, and working at my own pace. And two, how strong that smell of whiskey was when those barrels were split in two. That was my first whiff of entrepreneurship, and I loved it. It was intoxicating. I had other exploits, including growing a huge commercial garden one summer with my brother John and a friend of ours during college. After that, I was working for a CPA firm here in town and bought a liquor store for a side business. There was something about entrepreneurship that I couldn't resist. Work wasn't work at all. Work was play. Now, I'm not suggesting that your whole world revolve around your work, but you will enrich your work if you bring to it the same vitality and curiosity you bring to your play. Things seem to work out best for those who make the best out of how things work out. While working for the CPA firm, one of the companies that I audited had recently been purchased by Dan Carney, who most of you know was a co-founder of Pizza Hut here in Wichita. The company I audited for a couple of years was being run by Dan Taylor, who had been vice president of finance for Pizza Hut during their public years after himself being an independent auditor for Pizza Hut. Dan Taylor made me an offer to come to work for this fledgling company. It had accumulated $3 million in losses, had never filed a tax returns, and the company in and of itself was of little attraction to this aspiring young CPA. But I knew these guys' stories, and here was an opportunity to surround myself with these great people. As I said earlier, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that the great people need to be employees. They can be employers too. So I went to work and was able to feel like my ideas mattered. Maybe that's part of why they were so successful. Like Eisenhower, they got us to do things they wanted done because we wanted to do them. I had to do the menial things like file 4 years of tax returns in the first 3 months, but I also got to go to them with ideas, and I went to them once with an idea to restructure our debt as preferred stock. They listened, liked it, and did it. They made me feel like I made a difference. At age 25, I was invited to sit on the board where other ideas were listened to. And I was given an opportunity to buy 2% of the company for almost nothing, which is exactly what it was worth at the time. Eventually, we made an initial public offering, sold our core business, and together accomplished a complete turnaround of the company. Along the way, I learned a why not attitude from these two Dans, and I realized that they had become my mentors. I tried to disguise my looks of astonishment at the business moves they were making. Their dreams of what we could do with this public company were huge. We utilized the millions raised in the IPO and used the $3 million tax loss carry forward to open Pizza Hut and Rent-A-Centers in the southeastern United States and grew it to a $100 million company. Along the way, I was given the opportunity to move from finance and to lead the operations. On the outside, I exuded confidence. On the inside, I was nervous as hell. Behind the scenes, I was soaking up all the knowledge I could about successful operators and operations. I grew during that time like no other time in my life. I was placed in charge of site selection, real estate, lease negotiations, marketing, purchasing, and of course, operations. The experience was priceless, and the work, as I alluded to before, was not work. It was fun. My point in including this part of my background is first to reiterate the notions of mentoring and learning from others. I'm relatively certain that had I not been a witness to the risk-taking why not attitudes of these two gentlemen, I would not have been comfortable with taking the chances that I took then, or that I took later in the restaurant business. Secondly, I wanted to point out that you can still be an entrepreneur, or at least bring an entrepreneur's attitude to a business, even if you are an employee. Our Freddy's employees demonstrate that every day. There, of course, were failures along the way, too. In the heyday of our Timberline Steakhouse years, we came across the property on East 21st where Rio Bravo had been. There's a new restaurant there now called Twin Peaks. Even though they're both mountain things, let me just say Twin Peaks and Timberline were not the same. Anyway, we decided that what Wichita needed was a good seafood restaurant. Here we were with a perfectly good proven concept that had grown to 4 stores in 3 years at that point. And instead of just opening another Timberline, we created a whole new seafood concept. We cleverly called it Sea Bass Bar and Grill, using the initial C in the word bass as if it were someone's name. We developed and began a registration of the logo. We developed recipes, had tastings, developed menus, did decor. I'm biased, but the food was really good. We had the fresh fish offerings, really good items like fried lobster tail, the best crab cakes you'd ever taste. The only thing we didn't have was weeknight customers. I mean, the place was dead. Back then at Timberlines, we had wait lines at nights of up to an hour on weeknights and up to 2 hours on weekends. Sea Bass experienced no such phenomenon. What we came to realize was that the business travelers from Seattle were not going to eat seafood while in Wichita. They wanted a big, juicy steak from the Midwest. The other factor was kids. Freddy's is filled with kids on weeknights and weekends. Timberline always was filled with kids too. Kids do not choose seafood. And so we closed the restaurant for a few days, and before its 9-month anniversary, we opened it back up as a Timberline. Timberline did well there for over 10 years, and we frequently laughed at all the extra and avoidable work that went into that particular Timberline. What did we learn? Many things, but mostly that you must know what the market wants. Steve Jobs was a genius at this. He knew what we wanted even before we didn't. We knew what we wanted. The Freddy's story started with 2 brothers and a friend wanting to introduce Wichita to steak burgers. Oh, I'm sorry. So now I get to the fun part. I jumped ahead there. There have been other non-successes over the years. I really don't like the word failure. When Thomas Edison was asked how it felt to fail 2,000 times inventing the light bulb, he responded that he never failed even once. It just happened to be a 2,000-step process. So I've learned over the years that failure is a great teacher. Skipping her class may be less painful, but in doing so, you just may miss the lesson that would eventually lead to your success. Now the fun part, the Freddy's story. We're out of these non-successes. Freddy's isn't what it is because of Bill or Randy Simon or because of Scott Redler. Sorry, Scott. Freddy's is not what it is because of Freddy. Sorry, Freddy. Freddy's is not what it is because of any particular franchisee or employee. Freddy's has become what it has become because Freddy's has been extraordinarily blessed with a confluence of highly talented and dedicated employees and franchisees. This goes back to my comments about surrounding oneself with great people, only we all did it at Freddy's. The Freddy's story started with two brothers and a friend wanting to introduce to Wichita steak burgers, frozen custard, and other tasty treats like Chicago dogs, shoestring fries, and homemade tasting chili. You getting hungry again? To introduce an all-American classic dessert from a World's Fair in the 1920s in New York, the concrete. We thought the name Freddy's Frozen Custard sounded good. It sounded fun. And our Freddy was a humble World War II vet who provided the brand with a name and a face to patriotism and family values. A hero. Plus, he happened to love steak burgers and custard. We planned one store. We found a good site. We didn't know fast food, but we knew full-service restaurants and hospitality. Even the Rent-A-Center experience. Rent-A-Center's success was largely attributable to the hospitality it offered to a demographic which rarely was treated to hospitality by business. We hired employees who were nice. My partner, Scott Redler, has said on multiple occasions, we can teach restaurant operations to almost anyone. We can't teach nice. So we hire nice individuals to whom smiles come naturally. Key people are given opportunities to participate in ownership. I had been given that opportunity. It worked for me. Key people are also given the opportunity for promotion. Our director of operations, our director of training, director of purchasing, two of our regional managers, and all of the franchise business coaches all worked in stores and excelled. We empower our people to make decisions at the store level, to give the guests what's needed at the time. I remember how it felt to know that my ideas mattered, and I think they feel that way too. Prioritize your life, cherish your relationships above your business. It will make your business that much more successful. Always treat people right, be nice. Sometimes the mixing of personal relationships with business can be precarious, but they can also work out. Scott and I were good friends before we became business partners, and after 17 years, we're still good friends. Another partner, Randy Simon, and I were brothers before we got into the business, and amazingly, we're still brothers. I made several references to my dad so far and his influences on me. I'm not sure how many of you know that he is also the inspiration for and the namesake of our company. He is Freddy, and he's still my dad. Freddy's donates to or sponsors over 150 charitable causes every year, many of them related to the military. In the same spirit of giving back to the community, several of us and/or our spouses sit on nonprofit boards and assist with fundraisers. Freddy speaks to audiences, mostly high school history classes, about his experiences in World War II. Tuesday, he did it for the 53rd time in less than 10 years. He lists his self-titled Freddy-isms for the classes, such as love and thank your parents and teachers. Parents and teachers, you like that one? The last list of 15 is exercise and stay in shape so you can enjoy Freddy's frozen custard and steak burgers often. Giving back is part of the culture at Freddy's. Remember, there are awards and banquets, milestones and thresholds, but the most meaningful assessment of success is making a difference in the lives of others. Always include charitable causes in your business plans. If you're looking to start a business, or you are in a capacity as an employee to design manuals, systemize everything from the very start. Even if you don't plan to go multi-unit, it's just easier. It ensures that everything gets handled in the same way, whether it's recipes, training, discipline, hiring, whatever. In our case, we came from multi-unit system, and it's just how we did things. All of our procedures were documented and trained. Even though we intended to open only one store, we opened a second, and then we began to be asked if we would franchise. We said no, and we kept saying no, until more and more requests came from more and more qualified restaurant and business people. Then we said yes. There are now 22 franchisees signed up for nearly 400 stores. In 2013, we'll cross the 100-store threshold with system-wide revenues exceeding $100 million. We're still systemizing. We just rolled out an online video training course that I would put up against any other. It was developed internally by a few of our employer-owner entrepreneurs. It was their idea. 2 weeks ago, I was at a WSU Center for Entrepreneurship Advisory Board meeting and was sitting next to Dan Carney, one of my Dans. We were chatting after the meeting and he relayed to me something like, it's really cool that franchising still works. It was flattering coming from him, and I thought about what he said. What was it, or what is it that's working for us? It's emulating the way Dan in particular went about his role as franchisor, always remembering who the franchise are and the contribution to the growth of the concept that they make. To quote Dan from his foreword that he wrote for the book, The Pizza Hut Story, "The ingredients of the Pizza Hut story that have been most meaningful to me are my relationships with family partners and franchisees. We have had great fun, worked day and night, shared our fears, and journeyed through this great life with one another. Franchisees were the catalysts for the rapid growth of Pizza Hut. They drove the company with unwavering dedication. The Pizza Hut family still enjoys a fraternal brotherhood with a common pizza sauce running through our veins." Now at Freddy's, we may not have a pizza sauce in our veins, but we have something very similar to what Dan's metaphor was about. The same shared dedication, and we too are having great fun. Our email blasts to our franchisees start with, "Dear Freddy's family." We don't call our franchise conferences franchise conferences. We call them family reunions. I'm guessing that every competitor in this crowd has that same common ingredient in his or her blood, a solution that is comprised of obstacles and answers, combined with creativity, a willingness to work, the courage to risk much, the desire to coach and inspire others, and to bring to market the result of your blood, sweat, and tears, and might I add, laughter. After all, isn't that what the American dream is all about? Many years ago, I was a sophomore at WSU. Back then, as a college student, I questioned why an accounting major had to take all these other classes, such as the English Lit and speech classes I was in that semester. However, here I am, 30 plus years later, delivering a speech and referring back to that English Lit class in which I wrote a culminating paper and closed with this quote from Henry David Thoreau. I don't think Thoreau was writing about entrepreneurship or business plans, but it's always been a quote that hit a chord with me. I received a good grade on the paper, so I thought I'd use it again in hopes of getting a good grade from you. It definitely applies to a keynote speech to aspiring entrepreneurs such as you. Thoreau said this, "If one advances confidently in the directions of his dreams, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. If you've built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them." So I say to you, always count your blessings, continually learn from your non-successes, overcome your obstacles, stay fluid, open-minded, and receptive to change. Think and rethink your plans. Then put your foundations under them, and most of all, have fun every day doing what you're doing. Thank you. Good luck. God bless you, and God bless America.